and about whom you will one day say, hey, they came to Hunter while I was here. So that I think has been really cool. And I want to welcome Camilo and Ellpetha today. I'll let Jose do further introductions, but welcome to the Hunter Theater Department. You guys, I got a quick few announcements. Registration is open. This is not a normal semester. Therefore, it is not a normal registration. Classes that don't fill are going to get cut. So please register now or as soon as the computer will let you into the system. Elections for the student committee are coming up. Penny and Jenny are doing terrific work. Please think about running. This committee has such potential, and it's going to work when it's representative. And of course, CoLab. Um, Performances begin next week. I want to thank again Emily Altman, who's the president of the Low Foundation, and the daughter of the great Floria Lesky, for whom this series is named, and Madison and Sana, thanks for your help. So I'm really looking forward to this, you guys. Jose, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Greg. And next time you say something so beautiful, warn me because I'm not wearing waterproof mascara. I'm very happy to welcome Ellpetha Tsivicos and Camilo Quiroz-Vazquez because you pulled off something that everyone said was impossible. And the beauty of how you did it was that it didn't feel like you were pulling off something, like it felt effortless. But I know it, like it was a lot of work, right? But it was during the middle of August, like I remember getting this press release talking about a show that was like an immersive quinceañera experience that celebrated Mexican American culture, also queerness, and the community where it was happening. And obviously, as all of us know, like we are mostly trapped home in the middle of a global pandemic. And your show was actually the first live show with an audience to be performed in New York City since March 11th. And I was like, this is mind blowing. And I immediately knew that I wanted to know more about the two of you. And then, I mean, I'm not going to tell your story for you because that's what you're here for. Like, I want people to know about your creative process and how you're able to remind us, I would say, it's kind of corny, but to remind us that there's so much beauty even in the midst of a global pandemic and despite everything that's happening in the world. So thank you for reminding me of that with your quince and with your quince Dia de los Muertos, and welcome. I'm so happy to have you both here. So one of the things that strikes me as super interesting, especially for the students at the Hunter Theater Department, is that I want you to like go a little bit into how you became collaborators, because you do all your work together, right? Like, or is it most of your work?
Most.
Yeah, most of our work, definitely. Well, one, we're really excited to be here also, and thank you so much, Jose. Like, every time we've spoken with you, it's given us such an incredible boost of energy and momentum. I think the first time we talked to you was right before our first rehearsal, which we only had 4 of. So it was like a really amazing feeling. So thank you first for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ellpetha and I started working together at NYU. And it was pretty instant that we figured out that we wanted to create and make things together. We've been living and working together now for about 12 years.
We both were in the theater program at NYU. And we were in the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute together. And it's a really, cool place, but a lot of it was a little antiquated, but our teachers were really cool. But we both kind of felt a little bit like outsiders in there, and that's kind of what led to, he laughs because we were totally outsiders. But so I was, I just saw him and no one really talked to him, and then I was like, I want to talk to him. So then that's how we became friends, and then we just have a very good workflow, meaning we live together and we have for 12 years, so our work never really stops, which is healthy and unhealthy. But yeah, so and then we both spent 2 years at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute, and then Camilo studied abroad in Cuba. And then I went to the experimental theater wing at NYU, and then Camilo eventually also went there. So we studied physical theater there and devised theater, and it really was like an incredible, it was very complementary to what we learned at Strasberg, because Strasberg was like very by the book, but at the time it was very different. I mean, all the things Strasberg wanted to do were strange to the people learning it in the time that he was creating it. So we were given this kind of, more classical foundation, and then we were able to kind of use all of that to work outside of the box at the experimental theater wing.
Do you have like a secret formula to make collaboration work? Because please correct me if I'm wrong, but usually when artists go to school, you rarely see teams of collaborators emerge from that. It's usually people following their own path, and then the two of you follow a common path. So is there a way that you divide tasks? Is there a way that okay, you'll do this because it's your thing, and I'll do this because it's my jam? Or how does that process work exactly?
What are you going to say?
I was going to say, well, she's the boss and I try to keep up.
I mean, okay, as a director, the reason why I love directing is some directors want to make something that they have in their head, which I do, but I really like to see it's like the ingredients, you open up the refrigerator, you don't try to make a carrot into a tomato, so it's like when I work with performers or when I work with anyone, my goal is to understand what they're working on or what they're bringing to the table and highlight it as best I can within the world I'm trying to create. So with Camilo and I, we didn't always know what we were good at as a team. Yeah. And that, that took many years and time. And right now we're working on composition because I've got really good composition, and Camilo, it's everything's always slightly askew. And so sometimes when we're somewhere pretty, I'll just stop and I'll be like, okay, look at this frame. So that's here and that. But anyway, I digress. Camilo's mother is an educator, and in the public school system of Los Angeles, a very bureaucratic sort of environment. And so Camilo's really good at writing things like that, like applications. If I have I could tell a story, start to cry, paint a picture, and then I'm like, Camilo, can you put that in words? And then he's able to put that into words very effortlessly, whereas I could probably spend a lifetime trying to figure out how to put feelings into words, and I'm not that capable. I mean, he thinks I am, but yeah. It's definitely difficult for me. I definitely handle more of the aesthetics. We both do research, cultural research, yeah, and definitely references, and so that's both of us. And
I think it kind of just takes time too, not just with each other, but with now some of the people that we collaborate with more regularly, just kind of working with people and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I think now we have a couple of people that we were pretty committed to continuing to do work with, just because the way that they create really complements our style. So I think in a lot of ways it kind of just takes time.
And listening.
Yeah.
Listening, definitely. Always. I think that so many answers are there if you listen. But sometimes you have to change the way that you're listening to find what you're trying to find. That's the case with collaborators. Yeah. But Camilo's really good at editing. We work in film. I'm really good at editing words,
Yeah.
and making sure like the overarching meaning is there. Or sometimes I'll be like, I mean, this is
I
silly,
think
but
that's part of composition.
yeah, composition. I'll be like, what are you trying to do here? And he'll be like, it's no good, it's fine. I'm like, no, I didn't say it was good or bad. I just, what is it that you were trying to do? And he'll say, oh, I was trying to make the mom character seem strong, or I don't know, and I say, okay, I think you have to shift this dialogue a little bit, or like, maybe in the scene prior, you have to kind of, do this or that to make that happen. And it's like saving things all the time. Like I love I'm like, no, don't get rid of it. Like there's a way to make that stronger. So that kind of answers your question.
So.
You spoke about listening, and I want you to tell us a story about how Quince was, just a traditional play at first, right? It was, it's a story about a young Mexican-American woman in Los Angeles who's about to have her quinceañera, and she's also figuring out that she's queer and wants to express that. So you have like, a story about, identity, like two stories about identity, which is like probably like, the kind of thing like Hollywood would be like, yeah, no, this is too much, like pick one. And what you do with the script is that you, I don't want to say that you merge them, but you point out how all these different parts of who we are and how our identity, is perceived as making us other by other people, especially in America. You kind of like ignore that, and instead you celebrate both aspects of everything without really turning it into a didactic piece. So then the pandemic starts, and you can't really do a play traditionally anymore. So what was the listen moment when you realized that you could turn this that was something into something else different, but what was I guess necessary for you as artists, but also very important for you to give back to your community?
So there were quite a few things, I'll say, that led us on this path. One, I'll say that, and I can't talk about this work or the projects we've had without bringing this up, is that I spent 2019 in Cyprus taking care of my grandfather who was dying of leukemia, and he died at the end of the year. And so I got back to America a few days before the end of 2019 after being there for about 6 months, and it was very, very difficult and very intense. And I got back, and I was so excited to do everything that I love to do, my work, and I was so committed to I was like, well, I kept saying 2020 is going to be my year. Wait till you see. And it's this, big joke, because it's like I got back, we get through the holidays, January, and then you're starting to hear, oh, COVID-19, it's coming, it's not coming, it's might be here, it isn't here. And I was like, yeah, I don't care. We're moving full speed ahead. So I say all this to say that I definitely went into this year fully committed to making the best of every circumstance, because I was, I had some really, it's hard. Watching one person die is more difficult than experiencing a pandemic is not really, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but for me, it was something that I was, it gave me time to really...
You kind of already had this feeling of exhaustion in your body, and
I was ready for the opposite.
Yes, you're ready for the opposite.
So that was one thing that really gave me this inhuman strength to deal with whatever came at us. I was like, all right, no, I'll figure that out, because I just lost, all this time, and it was intense, and we're going to figure it out. The second thing is we were working with the Team, which is a Brooklyn-based ensemble theater company, and we had we were part of a project called the Petrie Projects, which is something we had applied for in 2019, where it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. You have an idea and they help you to produce sort of a workshop of it. And, you know, we were supposed to do a reading at
it was just going to be a reading
in a rehearsal studio, but we wanted it to still be immersive. There was going to be live music. There was going to be party favors. We were going to set it up like a quinceañera, but it was totally going to be in a rehearsal studio, a nice one. It was a nice one, but that was what it was, and so that was supposed to happen in April. So the team. Ali Lalonde and Laura Elliott, who we were working very closely with, were amazing.
They just kept scheduling meetings with us to keep talking about the project as if it was going to happen. And we were like, oh, I guess we should keep planning and talking about it. They seem so invested. We're still into doing it. Let's keep talking. And as we had those meetings, the idea kind of just kept developing, and we'd reschedule it 1 month at a time. So we'd be like, all right, maybe next month we'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
And then the next month would come and be like, there's no chance, let's do it next month. Until we got to a point.
We were still kind of competing for space in the first few months. Laura would be like, all right, there are 3 days open in May. Should we take them? And then by June, everyone gave up, and it would be like, yeah, so we could have any day in June. It's all open, and then the same thing with July. And then we, things started to open up, and we both work in film production. So we went back to work in person, which was really jarring and confusing. But we had to trust science. And we didn't have, it was not extreme to the left or extreme to the right of that. It was literally taking all of the facts and saying, okay, if I wear my mask and I keep it up and I don't touch my face and I wash my hands and I stay this far away from people and all these precautions, if I do all of them, the likelihood of me contracting this virus is very low. And we had to really rely on those facts every single day.
Yeah, at the same time, a producer that I work for had me take a OSHA certification course for COVID safety for productions. So that really helped kind of just get in our heads it's kind of sad, they're very simple precautions that we could take, and we could have really had this under control so much faster. But we didn't. So when we started planning, we realized, well, we have the power to control our own production and our rehearsal spaces and how we run the things that we have control over. So in our spaces that we run, we are going to have protocols, and we're going to do everything correctly. It's not going to be sloppy. We're going to just make sure everyone is safe. And if we do that, then we can do this, because restaurants are opening for outdoor dining. And that shouldn't be the only type of activity that is available for anyone.
Plus, at the time, we were like, well, we could go out to eat together with each other, but we didn't really want to eat with people we didn't live with, because, just because you're allowed to eat out doesn't mean you won't get COVID from a friend that you're eating with. Also, because we were working in person, we know that the people in the kitchen are working in person. Indoors, at the time, nothing indoors was open. And those people, they don't have some sort of luxury schedule where it's 1 day in the kitchen, 7 days off, they're there every single day. So we were just this doesn't make any sense. You can totally have something other than eating out, but we just have to commit to it and be very, very much in control of what's going on. I'll say also, in July, we were going for walks around the neighborhood. We were going for walks around the neighborhood the whole time, but in July, when the to-go drinks started happening, we were going for these walks around the neighborhood, and we'd get a drink and walk just for hours. And we noticed that there was live music at some of the restaurants, and some of the places had these hordes of people dancing, and you were like, man, they are really risking everything right now to dance, but also you could see how desperately people needed to emote, or, you know, like dancing, it's cathartic. Listening to music is cathartic. And so you could see these variations. Like one place on Flushing Ave, there were probably 200 people swarming into Flushing Ave, like an African drum circle.
Yeah.
And so we watched that from a safe distance, and we were like still, you know, feeling everything they were feeling, but also knew that's not something we are interested in engaging in. And then like down the street, there's like a salsa band playing, and you see people perfectly spread out throughout the street doing salsa, you know, in couples. And, you know, we danced for a while, and we were like, this is amazing. You know, the music, it travels. You don't have to be close to music to hear it. You could be 20 feet away. And so that also really helped. And finally, I'll say the team, who they are so incredible. And they also were just like, yes, and so we were like, we're thinking of doing it outside, and they're like, okay. And then they found a grant for us to apply for. One of the members of the company found it, and we brought it to the attention of Ali and Laura, and it was for doing plays right now, which is like, what a concept. So it wasn't just us thinking it. The people up top wanted this to happen too, right? So so we applied for this grant, and it covered some of the costs of like the PPE, the sanitizing stuff, extra like time that we would need to
having people designated just to make sure that things were being, like, the proper protocol was being kept up.
COVID safety officers. We didn't have like a stage manager in our budget, but we were able to get a stage manager, so Camilo and I could do less of that and more of important stuff, not just, you know, artistically, but making sure that everything was safe at all times, being able to really focus on everyone in the space. So what do we have there? We have live music in the streets that we could hear from blocks away. We have time in our neighborhood exclusively, where, I mean, all we had was our neighborhood, really. And we had this wonderful art institution, the team. And so with all of those things, you know, it just made perfect sense. Like the People's Garden is a garden that we wanted to do a play at for years. And so we just like walked over and we're like, hey, could we do a play here? And they're like, well, yeah, I mean, we have nothing scheduled for the whole summer. But normally they do. They have live music there all the time. They have big salsa parties. They have all this stuff going on there. They were like, they opened the calendar. It's like moths flew out. They're like, you know, they're like, well, we didn't know whether we could open or not. Just like everything else, they were like, so we have nothing planned. What do you need? And we were like, oh, we'll take, you know, 1 week in August. And it, you know, and then we told the team, and then, you know, we applied for the grant. We got the grant, which is the first grant we've ever gotten in our lives. So it's not like, I don't want to make it seem like, because when I was younger, people were like, I got a grant, I did all, and we were just, you know, we're 31 years old and we've applied for grants for years, but we got it this time. And so we, you know, we met with Rachel Chafkin and someone else, Matt Ross, who they're
kind of working on different think tanks on how to
open
Broadway safely, that work with different large institutions. And we kind of ran through our protocol with them and our idea and just everything we were planning to do. And they were like, sounds safe. Also, Rachel is the artistic director of the team, so that was the connection there. And Matt's on the board, so they were all affiliated with the team. But yeah, they were like, and so if everyone gets tested the day before and they don't have to wear masks, we're like, no, everyone's wearing masks. Like, we're just going to have everyone wearing masks. I mean, it's fine. I was like, I saw people doing small weddings and quinceañeras where it was like, there are 7 people here only and everyone's going to wear a mask. And I saw people wearing masks that matched their gowns. And I was like, it's the same thing. It's a really small
quinceañera that we're going to throw. And so
During
they're like,
COVID.
during COVID. So they're like, wait, so it's outside, everyone's wearing masks, it's a tiny cast and a tiny audience. And we were like, yeah. They're like, okay. I know Matt literally told us the contagion, some percentage of what the likelihood of contracting the virus in those circumstances were, and it was like 0.00002 or something. So everyone did get tested before we started rehearsals, but no one was allowed to take their mask off, and we were mean about it. We were not like, I just wanted to let you finish talking and then tell you to pull up your mask. I was just like, pull your mask up now. Like, your mask is too big. Like, Gus, our stage man. Gus, get her a different mask. Like, get her one of the surgical masks, you know. So, and that's all you need. You just have to work with the circumstances, which I think we've all gotten so far. We were talking about this yesterday. We've gotten so far away from that, going just to an arts program, like going to a college for the arts. And sometimes you're like, this is the way you do something. This is the way you do a play. This is the way, and it's not just, you know, in an arts program, it's everywhere.
Yeah, or like, this is how you have an arts career, or this is, you know, these are the jobs you have to get. You have to work here and then go there. And it's like, every individual is going to have a different path to figuring out how they make their work.
And I don't think that before COVID, having your own path necessarily led you to having a platform or having any success. And I think because of COVID, the entire building shattered and went to the ground, you know, and there not only wasn't a building, there was no foundation. And so we were able to kind of be like, well, hey, I brought 2 sticks. Could I put a table here, and then can we sit at it? And, you know, and then all of a sudden we were the only people at the table because we made a table. And so what we've been talking about is actually what a great time it is to be a student in the arts, because you are going to get out of school into an environment that desperately needs new thinkers and new ways of doing things. And people are totally floundering to figure out how to get things to happen because, one, the people who have been doing this for years have been doing it for years. So they also are just stuck in a way of doing things. And even though they want to do it differently, they may not have that available to them because they're so used to doing the same thing. And so it's actually a really hopeful time to be an artist, especially an artist that maybe hasn't been established before, because all of a sudden you have this space and you're not tied to a massive institution and you're not, you know, trying to fill a 2,000 seat Broadway theater. And you can do it in all different ways. And because there's nowhere else for people to go, captive audience, you know, all of a sudden people are willing to take a chance on you, which is something that we've never, no matter how hard we worked, we never really got that chance. So, and that is for multiple reasons. So, you know, one, we've always valued community, just both being, you know, I'm Greek Cypriot American and Camilo's Mexican American. We always have been a part of thriving communities. So we know the people in our community. We know the people we see every day. We know the parks, and we know the community gardens, and we know the nonprofits in the area. We know, I mean, we don't personally know the politicians, but we reach out to them and, you know, email them when we need something. And, you know, we really think that that's very, very important.
And trying to stay connected to the things that are close by. Yeah.
And that happened for a lot of people during COVID, but we all were so frazzled, you know, it's where do I get food in the neighborhood instead of ordering, I don't know what people do from Amazon. I guess that people order groceries on Amazon. But so yeah, we went to the garden. They were awesome. They said that they've always wanted to have a play there. Hernan, who was the caretaker of the garden, he's a wizard.
Yeah.
He's an older man, an older gentleman that you're not sure what he's doing, but he's always doing something. It's you walk over, he's I just fixed this chicken coop the chickens have a new place, and you're like, wow, I did not expect that to be what you were doing over there.
Yeah.
And he, you know,
figuring out just like technical things for us that we hadn't asked him to figure out. Just that I'm like, how did you know we needed that?
It was like a family.
Amazing, yeah.
But I think that when you, it's not a coincidence that we value community and then we find families all over.
Yeah.
You know, these. So going local is a really, I think, big deal right now. I think a lot of people started to notice that. I think it's something we've gotten so far away from in America because it's like, you know, I could have anything I want within a day or two of ordering it. So why bother local? Or it's, you know, I don't know, it's hard to get around in New York. So but working locally, yeah. So, and then most of the cast happened to be somewhat local.
Yeah.
And we found them all through Camilo can speak to that.
Yeah, well, it was just such a wild process of finding the cast because, you know, we reached out to a lot of people and some people obviously like were kind of hesitant or just didn't respond. And I was like, oh, people are still really scared to kind of do things. I understand that completely. But then we got like one recommendation of someone that didn't end up working out, but through them kind of just found this like really awesome community of Mexican and Mexican American.
He stalked people on Instagram.
I did stalk people on Instagram and I was like, oh, cool. This person seems like a really cool artist. I don't even know if they're a performer. Let me message them and see if they're interested in being in the show. And then they would usually say, I didn't message a ton of people. I very like specifically, I was like, oh, this person looks great. And they'd be like, hi, stranger. Yeah, maybe I could do this show. Who are you? And they're like, what are we doing? But they all ended up having these really interesting connections to the characters that we had asked them to play without any real like planning on my part. I mean, I was going by like their aesthetic on Instagram and the work that they were put on there. Like Ketsi, who is a traditional Mexica dancer, and she kind of comes in and gives a lot of great advice to the main characters figuring out her identity. And the first time we talked to Ketsi on the phone, she was like, oh yeah, actually my daughter is 18 and she's queer. And I was like, oh,
like,
what?
Does she want to be in the show?
Yeah, and she was like, no, she's very shy. I was like, okay, that's fine. But, you know, she brought that experience with her, and it just like every character in the show kind of had something like that.
Yeah.
And it really, really, really layered the piece and just made it a much richer experience. And they were able to bring small cultural aspects, which informed like costume or, you know, line changers or music and things like that.
Yeah. And then the final one, funny, was Cynthia the Quinceañera. We had posted a backstage listing back in like late February when we thought we were doing it in April, and it was like a couple days before rehearsals were supposed to start, and the team's like, and what's going on with casting? We just like, and we're like, oh, don't, we just need another day. And so we like opened up backstage, we were going to put another posting up, and we looked through and we saw Sarah, and then, you know, we like, well, Camilo was going to call her or send her a message, and I said, you know, I think it might be better if I do it. You might like come off as creepy. So I called her. I was like, hi, Sarah, do you want to be the star of this show? And, you know, she was like sending me selfies, memorizing lines. I was like, you have to be memorized before you get there on Monday. And like, she's like showing me, and she was like fantastic. I mean, she was like, you know, like the straight A student of the cast, like really amazing. So that's that.
Knowing, you know, for instance, that when you go into any project, like anyone, like an artist have a vision, right? So can you talk about specific things that you couldn't be precious about? Because Ellpetha, you spoke about working with the circumstances, right? But I feel that, and this is, you know, I completely understand that this is a moment of grief all over the world. And you know, there's a part of us that's like probably in denial. So for you to take this project and actually make it happen, there were things besides the location that you were like, okay, we can do without this. So if you could think about specific things that the students maybe haven't taken into consideration, besides that grant, which sounds really fabulous, by the way, what were some things that you realized you could do without and still have a work that you loved and were proud of and that did something for the community?
So one, the length of the show.
Yeah.
It was short because it was a chance for everyone to dip their feet into communal activities after all of us were terrified and locked in our houses for several months. So one thing that we kind of thought as a weakness, like it's really not that long of a script, we were like, this is fantastic because how did I work with that? It's like when you get into a cold swimming pool, you have to like literally put your foot in slowly. So I was like, it's going to take everyone a long time to get in. And I also want it to feel like I'm slowly putting them into the swimming pool. So we worked with that. We were like, how can we make the entrance into the space, one, considerate to how people are feeling about gathering, while also making it safe for them to all be separated, right? So then our entrance into the space through the garden took about 25 minutes, and that was planned. And then we had the performers in different places throughout the garden, and everyone got a chance to kind of see them from a distance, and see the space and be able to walk slowly through it. And I think in that time, it was a mini journey for everyone to be like, okay, yeah, no, see, I see that this is safe. I feel safe. I'm outdoors. I'm in a garden. Everything's spread out. I can see they're letting people in slowly. I haven't had to get close to anyone. So that was something where I was like, fantastic. And we did the same thing with the exit. And just like that, you know, people were there for about an hour and 15 minutes instead of like, you know, the script's only like 15 to 18 pages. Yeah. So another thing is we really wanted to feed everyone because, I mean, it's a party. Like, you know, we both grew up going to like, things like this. And there's always food and drinks. But we were like, we don't want to have to deal with people taking their masks on and off. We don't have the space. We don't have the resources. And to be honest, we don't want to risk it. We don't want to go there. We don't want any reason for people to take their mask off during the time that they're with us. So we got rid of that, which is something that, you know, we really want to reincorporate one day because, like, how can you not feed people?
At a quinceañera, especially, I mean.
As a Greek woman, I'm like, how can you not feed people all the time? But, so that, then, you know, there were some characters that we combined because we were like, oh, he has one line, he has one line, he has one line. They're all going to be one person switching their hats. Yeah. And that was something that
cast size had to be reduced.
Yeah, definitely. And people that were kind of like, you know, it's just not the risk, reward. So it's like the risk of having 3 extra bodies for one line is just not worth it.
Or the risk, you know, there's an older character that was played by a much younger actor in a mask, because it was just like, you know, do we feel comfortable asking an elderly person to come to rehearsal?
They didn't necessarily have to be elderly, but they definitely were going to be over 50. Yeah. And we had people that were really excited to do it, and then we were like, and then again, it was just listening. Ketsi suggested someone. Yeah. We followed who Ketsi suggested. It's a younger person that
is a musician, and they brought up this dance from the state of Michoacán called the Danza de los Viejitos, the dance of the old people. And it's this dance that's done around Day of the Dead, where people wear a mask and then they wear this hat with colorful ribbon. And it's younger people, and the joke is that they're all younger doing this really fast movement, but they're supposed to be old. And we were like, well, that's perfect for your character. You're a younger person, and you will be playing an older person. And we created the hat that they use in that dance.
My mom
made the hat.
Yeah, which is like, she's so good at making stuff, but like just doesn't have enough opportunity to do it. So I was like, Mom, you're hired. And she made this hat. But then the mask, our friend who was doing the set design in the garden, we sent them the inspiration, and then we were like, but we wanted to feel a little bit like a crescent moon too. And then their name is Zoe, and Zoe knocked it out of the park.
Really.
And you end up stumbling upon wonderful opportunities when you are willing to work with what's in front of you. Even just what I was going to talk about Jimena.
Okay.
Jimena, who played the grandmother. The grandmother is just a spirit. It's the spirit of the family. And Jimena is trans, non-binary, and also not a 75-year-old person. And this is who is playing this spirit, this very, very, very sacred character. And it was just like...
It was more than a grandmother.
It was more than a grandmother, because it represented the family, the entire family tree. And so we were like, whoa, that's incredible, and it just so many things like that.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. And then,
a person, Scarlett Morano, who we collaborate with very often, who's an incredible everything, really. Just any idea we have, she comes back with it like 100 times better than we could have thought of it. We were like, well, we want to create a real sense of community with the audience in the space, and we had the idea a while back to give everyone a party favor like they would get at a quinceañera. So we thought, what if we gave every audience member a themed mask that they could wear at the show, and then everyone in the audience would be connected by this shared experience of wearing this bright, silly, colorful, COVID-safe mask. And these are them. Yeah, we have them. They're cringy, and they're all different.
They're one of a kind.
Yeah.
And,
well, she made 200 of them.
Yeah, I told her, I was like, it's going to be 60, and then I mailed her 200. And she's like, oh, there are a few more than you said. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, but anyway. And she's like, I did them all in one day. So everyone got one, and they walked into the space with this mask on. But it's like, making something that could be perceived as ugly, not because of all this controversy over wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. It represents the problem we're all dealing with. We have to wear a mask because there is this virus. So, it's interesting to see how people engage with that. Do you have a reusable mask? Do you have a surgical mask? Do you have a pretty mask? Do you have a fancy mask? And it's like, how do you want to look at, it's people who have scars, they get beautiful tattoos over them, it's like, how do you want to look at this thing? And we're like, oh, this is the pain point, having to wear a mask. And I'm like, oh yeah? Tell me that this looks painful, tell me that this doesn't make you smile, and also make you be like, oh my God, I have to get one of those masks. And
it's also a part of this project is we're not going to ignore what's going on. We're going to make it louder and brighter, and you're going to have to look at it, but also you're not going to have to focus all of your energy on it. It's just there, and it exists, and we have a whole life outside of it.
Yeah, and what was amazing was people were just afterwards so emotional, and they were like, you did a public service. I haven't had to be somewhere in months, and that the fact that I got to come to this with music and scents and sounds and this lovely little story, they're like, we gave everyone a therapy session of getting outside and feeling okay about it, which is very different for people who get to work from home for the time being. They're not going to have to go out and interact with people for work, which is a huge privilege. But also I think we do all have to start figuring out how to live in this environment, rather than thinking our lives are on pause right now. They're not. When this is over, we're not going to get this card that gives us back this time. It's the only time we have. We are alive right now, and we have to make the best of these circumstances. And like I said, I I only have this perspective because I spent 6 months not doing that when I was caring for my grandfather. I was like depressed every day and scared and anxious and stressed. And then it was like one of those things, like I got back and I said, I have these muscles now to like cope. Yeah.
I was thought, and I even talked to you about it the first time we spoke. There was that contrast that week when Quince happened, that it struck me as so like extreme, right? Like here you were doing a show about immigrants and culture and the importance of sharing your culture and what it does to your community at a place called the People's Garden. And the same weekend, First Lady Melania Trump was showing the world her new rose garden at the People's House, right? While outside the White House, there were barricades and like the military was basically attacking protesters. That contrast between like you actually doing something for the people and then this, not true, I guess, like fake basically idea of like welcoming people. It always just struck me as like incredibly poetic and heartbreaking for the government and all of that, but also like really beautiful because like you said, like you gave something to your community. And then I was already like impressed by the two of you. And then I got the email about Quince, Dia de los Muertos, and I'm like, holy crap, it's like a Quince universe. And can you talk a little bit about like how because that was also a live performance with people and yeah. So how how did you realize that you could not necessarily like stretch, but that you could take something from Quince and then transform it into yet another site-specific event, and that's more of a installation, like an art installation.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll say even better about the garden thing is there's a homeless shelter across the street. And so we became friends with all of them throughout the week. They watched the entire show because like the fence around the garden is like has big like openings in it. So like some reviewers were like, and the onlookers on the street, and we're like, onlookers, that's the mayor. He's been there every day. Like he knows the story. He'd be like cheering
at the
end.
My
God.
God. Yes, Cindy.
So it was like, it was really for people because it was on Broadway in Brooklyn. But it was on Broadway, which is a very busy street. So everyone walking past got to see it. And that wasn't an accident. It was on purpose. But how we got to do the next thing was an incredible friend of ours, Ellie, who there was a photo wall. She is a street artist that does these crochet street pieces. Mostly her claim to fame has been monsters, really cute pastel monsters eating Donald Trump. And so they're all over the city. And we told her about Quince, and she's like, I want to make something. I'm thinking giant flowers. And so she made this photo wall for us that's like, it's just like, it's probably going to end up on the wall of our apartment for a long time, but it's huge and it's beautiful. So she got invited to show her work at a community space, the Gowanus Dredgers Boathouse. And they are an incredible really awesome group of people also. And it's not, it's literally a boathouse for the Gowanus Canal, but they do put artwork up. And so her artwork was up there, and the person representing her work organized all of that. And Ellie just kept saying, like, the best piece I've ever made was this thing for Quince, and I really want them to do something here. And she really, really pushed for it too. And she wouldn't drop it with us either. She kept telling me, like, I don't know if you can hear us over it. This, but,
I mean, it's New York, it's fine.
Yeah. So
bound
she
to happen.
saying, can you guys do Quince here? And we're like, okay, well, is there someone that could pay for it? Like, because like, and then there wasn't. So we couldn't do, also like the literal space just like didn't work for Quince.
Yeah, we couldn't have kind of the audience separation that we could have with Quince, or the type of control over the space.
Yeah.
Because it's a more open...
There's a promenade along the Gowanus Canal there that's open to the public. You can't really close it off, nor would we want to, because that really wouldn't be working with the space. So Camilo had seen a lot of Dia de los Muertos programming going on in the city.
And there was I had been wanting to make just kind of a small altar for us, or had been thinking about it, just doing it here, but I hadn't really conceived of the full idea. And then we kind of started trying to figure out what to do
with this space. She kept saying, do something with the space. And I'm like, I just don't have the idea. Like, so I kept listening to her push us, and then I kept going, I just don't have a thing. And then one day I got the idea, so that was it.
Yeah.
But I said, let's make a community altar. I just dealt with my own personal grief the year before, and then I walked in, we all had the pandemic where we were just surrounded by like nonstop death, and we still are.
And we don't talk about it in a very healthy way. I think mostly just a kind of a very American thing. Like I kept remembering, and still do see, like on the New York Times, the daily count of how many people have died today. But then there's no and these are their names, and this is who they were, and this is any information about them, and that's just to me felt like a very cold, very American way
made it
to
easy
deal with
to
it.
Pretend it wasn't happening, but it was. I mean, if I was so affected by one person dying, the fact that we are above 200,000 people dead, whether or not it is it's neither here nor there, the severity of the illness, or if they had issues beforehand, or it doesn't matter. It's just that what we're hearing every single day is about death. And it's not a coincidence that we all feel like we're supposed to be miserable every day. And I just am like, no, you can't do that. It'll make you sick. We can't do that. We're all going to get sick. We're going to get sick, very sick, long-term sick. We can't be miserable every day. So I've always been very moved by the way that Mexicans handle, I mean, I can't speak for all Mexicans, but culturally this holiday is really opposite of what you think about with death, because it's bright colors and music and bringing them food, and it's all the things that you would do with people when they were alive. And I always say, when people die, energy can't be created or destroyed. We lose the person in the form that they were in, but energy can't be created or destroyed, so they're somewhere. And so this holiday gave us a way to acknowledge those people, but also do something again for create a dialogue with the community.
And then to connect Quince to it, which is this celebration of birth and life, a birthday in the summertime. Then you transition into the fall, which is, that's why Dia de los Muertos is in the fall. Things are starting to die, things are changing. It's kind of like a continuation of that circle of just having these characters that were celebrating the life of this person and of celebrating the death.
Their role in the story is their role in sort of Mexican culture. Right. It's the grandma character is literally the ancestors. So of course that character would be at Dia de los Muertos. That's the star of the show, it's that we're oh yeah, they're here. And then the danzante, the Mexica dancer, they lead a dance or a ceremony for Dia de los Muertos specifically. When we talk to Ketsy's oh yeah, I'll do the north, south, east, west, and you invite the ancestors, and you ask them if it's okay to invoke them. So of course Ketsy would be there, and then Cynthia, the quinceañera. Who wouldn't want to see a girl in that dress with a sugar skull makeup on, a dead quinceañera?
And then to work with the Gowanus dredgers who hosted the event. They worked so much with conservation of this incredibly polluted waterway, which is kind of also symbolic of this death, that this death that we place upon the earth, but also the work they do is to rejuvenate it and bring it back. And they were like, oh yeah, can we put these characters on canoes? And
no, it's so funny. Like I was Brad, who we dealt with, that he was like an angel, literally an angel. I'd call him and I'd be like, so do you have electric we can use? And he'd be like, we have electric, we have microphones, we have tents, like we can put the cord as far out as we need, we just have to worry about people tripping. And then he's like, what about the boats? And we're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, I was thinking maybe we could put someone on the boats. He's like, how about decorating them? And I'm like, okay, I'll decorate the boats, you know? So, and they also are dealing with something really interesting right now, which is that finally the EPA has approved the rehabilitation process, beginning the process of rehabilitating the Gowanus Canal, which is something that they have been fighting for it, sometimes single-handedly, since 1991. And as a result, they have learned that they most likely are going to lose access to the canal while that's happening, which is beautiful, but that it's happening, but also very sad for them, because I don't think they necessarily expected that they would lose access to the canal. And it comes at a time where they were desperately looking for other ways to help their community. And we just, you know, again, it's magic. I think when you're doing all the right things and you're being really truthful and doing it all for the right reasons, these things do come to you. And, you know, we're just like, hey, could we do this thing? And they're like, oh my God, that's exactly what you can like. So, and then we called up Make the Road, and they are
connected us with, they're an immigrants' rights organization, housing rights, a lot of different advocacy.
Because we were in Gowanus, which is, you know, very close to Sunset Park,
and there's like a large Mexican and Central American population, and they connected us with the Street Vendor Project, which connected us with like these amazing
tamales. Is what he wants to say.
Like I know her like regular spot now, and I like will be eating them all year round.
So we had a food truck, and this space, it's a huge cul-de-sac, and then there's a promenade. So the food thing, right? Like we have the space now for people to be able to eat and stay separated. So we had a food truck, and we had a tamale lady who also had champorado and warm arroz con leche. And so that was amazing. And then we had this beautiful altar that Ellie, the crochet artist, she asked us what we were thinking. I said, I'm thinking like American Gothic, but as skeletons. And then Camilo's like, we have a magnet of that on our fridge. And I was like, is that where I got that imagery from? And he's like, that's where she got that from. I was like, you know. But so she crocheted these two beautiful skeletons, and then we invited everyone to bring something to add to the altar. We had the characters on the Gowanus, as well as roaming throughout. Everyone, of course, was masked. We had some new characters. Camilo found this really cool...
in one of the southern states of Mexico, in Chiapas, there's this tradition of, they're called Pansouros, which means like a big bellied person. And they're these characters that dress in this incredibly grotesque manner that represents their sins. So the more that they sin, the more grotesque their appearance should become, and they kind of appear in these different places around, you know, their towns or villages, you know, cultural events, kind of freaking people out. So we added one of those characters to the event.
Which is like bed sheets and pool tubes. It's like, then, you know, it's like you can do it. Like you can do it in your own house, these things. But we had all of them there.
And also this really, really amazing group of dancers. They're called Tecuanes. They're from the state of Puebla traditionally, and they do this really wild dance that kind of commemorates a communal jaguar hunt. So there's a character dressed like a jaguar with a whip.
Big whip.
A big whip that makes like a, you know, the whip sound.
It's like 15 feet long.
Yeah.
And there's a jaguar.
Yeah, and they're like the characters with these giant oversized sombreros with like big mustaches, just kind of like totally surreal.
Kind of like Commedia.
Yeah, really.
And they do this huge dance, and the cul-de-sac is like massive, so they did that dance. And we had a really wonderful artist there, also Jasmine,
Yeah.
who
Again, my Instagram stalking, I found this this painter, Jasmine, like a week and a half before the event on Instagram, and I was like, wow, I really love her like paintings. She had done like a lot of like Calavera stuff, and I just kind of messaged her and was like, hey, would you be interested in like having any part of this in this event? I don't know what you would be interested in doing, but you know, feel free to join us.
Turns out she could do everything.
Yeah, she got there like an hour before it was about to start, and we were like putting together the altar, and we were like,
she'd be like, stop!
She's like, yeah.
You can't put that on the bottom level.
Yeah.
That's for animals. And I'm like, oh my God, thank
I'm like, okay,
God.
you do whatever you want here.
And then I'll also say that two people ended up being sick on Friday around 2 p.m., we were told. And that was the grandma character and the Mexica dancer. So that was a massive obstacle that we somehow overcame by like just reaching out to everyone and being like, do you know anyone? Actually, Jimena, who plays the grandmother, very good, like again, called and was like, I'm sick and I have a replacement. And we were like, bless you. I was like, bless you. But then the Ketsi, that was a little bit more difficult, but we had someone who dances with Ketsi sometimes come, and she was, I mean, they both were incredible. They were amazing.
That's super proactive of her. And I want to, I'm going to open up the space for a Q&A, and I want to thank, students, if you have to go to class, you can watch the rest on YouTube, and thank you for joining us. And I also want to thank Emily Altman and the Low Foundation for making this happen. So if you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box. And we actually have a question right now. So
that's a good one.
So besides the grant, how did you go about raising the funds to make all of this happen?
So part of the Petrie Project series, the way that with the team, the way that works is that there is a fund, and it's a participatory budget, which means we all had a meeting before we really got started with the process.
Every artist that
had applied and that had been selected, we kind of talked out our budgets, and we had a total amount that could be allocated for everyone, and we all worked together to kind of find places where we could cut to make everyone's project possible. So that was the first chunk of money that came from there.
And then we did a Kickstarter also for Quince before we knew about COVID, which if we had known about COVID, we probably would have tried to raise more money. But that was why that grant ended up helping us. And then the other thing I will say to young people, young artists, is corporate matching programs. Befriend people who work in corporate America. They have incredible donation matching programs, and you can fundraise a little bit of money and pool it through these programs, and these corporations match that. I mean, of course you have to still raise that money, but it's an incredible resource that I had very vaguely known about. But after we did Quince, some friends of mine who work in corporate America came forward, and they were like, we have matching programs. And I was like, what? God, it's like magic, but it's there and it's available.
And also, I think while you're doing events or whatever you're doing, something that we're very shy about, and like I think it's a kind of a children of immigrant thing of like asking people for money, but like inviting people to give tips or to give donations while you're doing the event.
The team really pushed us to do that.
We were like, I don't know.
And I'd be like, and please, thank you. Could you give us some tips? Like, I'm like, and then the people wanted to give tips though. I mean, we got a lot. And again, all of that money for us, it literally goes into paying all of these artists. I mean, donating to the locations that we use, and literally putting the money directly into these communities.
Yeah, we're really proud to say that good majority of our budget goes to paying artists and personnel fees.
Yeah, 95%.
Yeah.
And I saw another question that was it bilingual?
Let me read the question for you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Was the project bilingual, and is it published and able to be licensed to other performers?
So really cool thing that happened. So I wrote the script in English, and for certain characters that spoke Spanish, I wrote the translation in parentheses. And we were like, we have to figure out this like translation thing and how we're going to do this. And then the first day when we did the first read through with the cast, they just did both of the lines like without us asking them to, in this really like seamless kind of Spanglishy sort of way.
I did ask them to.
You asked them to? I was like, I don't know how they did.
And so,
but the way they did it was so natural. I just loved it because that is how you exist in immigrant communities all across the US. You know, people, you switch back and forth without thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you can understand, I think, even if you don't speak one of the languages fully, it's pretty clear, you know, what everyone's saying. But I'll say one thing that was interesting is that none of the reviews mentioned the fact that it was bilingual, which I thought was really interesting and strange. Yeah. And something that I think about a lot is how immigrants are kind of expected to speak 2 languages or more, and it's not seen as something that's exceptional. Whereas if somebody who's just from the US, you're like, oh, you speak another language. You learned it. Yeah, you learned French, but if you come into the United States and you can just do this like seamless translation, it's kind of seen like, well, yeah,
of course,
you should be able to do that.
And is it licensed to be done?
No. So our goal for this upcoming year is to expand it once it's, you know, COVID safe to do longer performances, because I would like it to be a full script before we, you know, publish it or do anything like that.
So that universe that happened, the Quince universe, where you do like different things about it.
Yes.
We have another question from Spiro Galiatsatos, who asks, did this project spark a creative fire? And is there another project coming? So make that Quince universe like.
Yeah. Well, one, I just want to say, Jose, again, you pronounced that name perfectly. And I am so impressed. And I think Spiro's probably smiling. Yes, it did totally spark a creative fire. I mean, with the Day of the Dead event was a big, small... Camilo's mom said, I thought you guys were doing something small. I'm like, yeah, a band, a dance troupe, 8 performers, canoes, a taco truck, tamales, like just an altar. Little thing. But we're hoping to be doing Quince in a similar form that we did it this past summer in LA in March. And in the plaza.
Yeah, where I started doing theater at Plaza de la Raza in Los Angeles, which is a Mexican cultural arts center in a public park. We're still kind of trying to work out the logistics of that, but that's where we hope to do Quince again.
And then, in the summer, next summer, we're hoping to do a much larger scale production of it in New York. We have a few other things going on in New York. We're invited to be a part of the Exponential Festival, which is going to be digital, but we are again going to push the limits a little bit, and we'd like to have like a very, very small audience of maybe 2 to 3 people that will have very specific roles within the space that will make the digital version of it come to life even more. And then
I think Spiro liked this one. The
Spiro,
Hellenic,
yeah. And then we were invited to apply for a residency at the Cell, which we've applied for. We haven't heard back, but either way, we're still working on this. Go ahead and tell Spiro.
Yeah, this one. We're kind of doing a full circle into our cultures. It's called the Hellenic Mysteries. It's kind of based on these ancient rituals that happened across the Hellenic empires that are tributes to the deities and goddesses like Persephone, Demeter, and Aphrodite. They're kind of these rituals that were women-led, which is really cool to think about ancient women-led rituals. that just kind of celebrated rejuvenation and life, and
death.
that we don't really know much
Nothing.
about, because they were mysteries, because they were very secretive. So we're kind of creating an experience around those ceremonies.
Yeah, and they also, you know, would claim to have learned the secret to life and death at these ceremonies, and I'm like, you know, and then the Crusades happened, and Christianity was like, burn that down.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's also like really tied to the work we've been doing, because, you know, these ancient cultures, like ancient Mexica or Aztec or Mayan traditions, aren't that dissimilar from ancient traditions that happened in the Hellenic Empire before Christianity appeared, and their relationship to Christianity is similar. It's like you have these very pagan rituals that got blended in as a way to hold on to them. You put a Christian feel to them, but you're still doing your ancient tradition.
Slaughtering a lamb for Easter, like, just happens to be like the time of, you know, of spring and all of those things. So we're really, and also where I'm from in Cyprus is called Paphos, and it was it's the most ancient part of Cyprus, and the entire region was all dedicated to Aphrodite. She was born in Paphos, and that is where people came from all over the Hellenic Empire in antiquity to this temple of Aphrodite. It's written about in the Iliad and the Odyssey, and like, you know, it's just like a wall and a black rock now, like, and it's this thing that everyone throughout the temple of Aphrodite, that is, and all that's left after, you know, Christianity is this like a perimeter wall and this black rock, and it's like the black rock is, like, all the writing is about this black rock, and you're like, okay, everyone in the Hellenic Empire came to ancient Paphos, to this temple, and all we have is this perimeter wall and a black rock, and we have no idea what they did here. So it's, yeah.
That's so cool. Spiro also says, I didn't get to see this project, but thank you for making it a point to make a show during these crazy times that address sexuality, gender, culture, non-binary identification, and gives a nod to the dreamers. And you're welcome, Spiro. I was lucky. I love talking to the two of you about how at a moment where many like immigrant communities and different cultures are told in a way that we should be, you know, like split, right? Like it's separated, and that we have nothing in common, and therefore we all should be like fighting our own battles, so to speak. The two of you, and Ellpetha, I remember you saying something the first time we spoke about how there was a lot of similarity in the culture in terms of family between you and Camilo. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that, about the, I don't want to say were you surprised or anything, like, or were you like, because it's an idea that we are sold the opposite of, that we have nothing in common.
Yeah, totally.
And
well, I think we're all in this together, and it's our similarities that make us strong. Being able to understand what you have in common with the person next to you makes the world a better place. But that being said, we're both first-generation American, and
with similar dynamics. Like both of our fathers were the ones who immigrated here. Our moms are from the same or similar cultural groups, but they were born in the United States, you know. So Ellpetha's mom is Greek, but she was born in New Jersey. My mom is Mexican. She was born in California. So there's like a similar dynamic to like what our fathers think is traditional versus what our mothers think is traditional.
Yeah, I mean, and just like growing up in houses where, you know, it's like we both like love going to our countries kind of without our parents, because no one yells at us if we mess up the way we speak or something, you know, like, or like getting the chance to like make the food from our country without like I don't mean my direct well, yeah, everyone. It's like, you can't put arugula in that. And I'm like, oh, why? And they're like, because you can't put arugula in lentils. And you're like, what's going to happen? It tastes delicious. And like, you know, we get to do stuff like that together. But Also, just, we both grew up in these microcosms of our cultures where, there's this fire under your ass when you're an immigrant to the United States or you're first generation American, of constantly trying to preserve something that could be lost to America. And, I think what's interesting is like my mother's father, who came through Ellis Island, he would always say to me, "You're American." And my father would say, "Don't ever say you're American, you're Cypriot." And so they came to America at very different times, where like when my grandfather on my mom's side came to America, it was really, for him, he really had to assimilate. He had to change his name at Ellis Island. He had to try to blend in order to do anything. Whereas when my father came in the 80s, of course, like America always wants you to assimilate, but in the 80s, it was a lot easier to just, you didn't have to change your name at the border, like you had to do. So my father was always kind of able to to raise us to be super proud that we're not from here. And then my mother, with the experience of being born in America, growing up, going to Greek dance and Greek school and going to church and learning all of their mother's and her grandmother's recipes. And Camilo had that same.
Yeah, totally. And I think, and one thing that's really cool for me is, we say we grow up in microcosms, but like being Mexican American in Los Angeles, it's kind of like a macrocosm. Like everyone was Mexican growing up, like, or, Mexican Central American, where like we're huge population groups, and talking about things that are kind of imposed on us as immigrants or children of immigrants. There's kind of this idea that like, oh, Mexicans in America don't have that much, and they need to be like shown the way. But when I, talk to Ellpetha about her understanding of like first generation Americanness or these things with assimilation, I'm like, oh, well, it's because of this, and that, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, well, there are departments at major universities that just focus on Chicana studies, Mexican American studies. There are like generations of artists and philosophers and, thinkers that have been developing our sense of what it means to be multicultural and, just not just Mexican, not just American, but, Chicano or Chicana. So it's that learning from each other that really informs a lot of our work as well.
He's very often like a guide for me in a lot of immigrant stuff in the US, because it's just like, I'm from a tiny country. Like my father was a goat herder, and a very good one from what I understand, or maybe bad, I don't know. I think maybe bad because he left, but he's literally a goat herder. And so like, he came here, and we are such a small population compared to Mexicans and Central Americans, and then all of South America. It's like literally connected to North America. People act like they're so far away, and it's like, wow, it's so cool that your country is literally attached to America. I have to fly halfway across the world to see my family, and so we're able to kind of identify, like, some people, like you said, can think of it as very inclusive, and he could be like, yeah, you have this and I have that and we're different. Instead, he's like, oh yes, this is a common thing that happens amongst immigrant groups. You could reference this thing in history that happened to this Mexican American, and like how it was handled in the government, or how this happened. And it really informs a lot of stuff for me, that like there's no like Cypriot American like rule book, and there are so few of us even in Cyprus, that let alone in America. There are all these strategies of how to maintain your culture that have been studied and established within, Latin American culture and Chicano culture. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then
I love how you are both celebrating your culture, learning about each other's culture, and also like preserving, things like oral tradition. And the last thing that I want to ask you is, there's an aspect of ritual. Not only, obviously, like el altar de Dia de los Muertos is like clearly like a ritual, right? But the experience of gathering and witnessing art is a ritual itself as well. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I mean, I want to hear everything about the Greek gods and like how they relate to the saints and all of that. But there's an element of ritual always in gathering and like being exposed to art. And for the two of you, did that, maybe there's not like a specific moment that you can pinpoint, but when did you maybe realize, or how has that process of figuring out that theater and art, and I mean like even films, I think can be some sort of like a prayer because they never change, and you can like, and I'm getting all metaphysical and stuff, but yeah, I would love to hear you talk about this because like you are so, I don't know, like I love hearing you talk about your cultures.
Well, I guess one thing that like immediately stands out to me is I remember in like our theater studies class, we were taught that the first theater, which I think is kind of bogus to think about, was church, like Christianity, and that, you know, the ceremonies that would happen in religion. Well, look, it's all shifted towards Christianity, but these things happened before Christianity. But I will say that, like, growing up, you know, I grew up Greek Orthodox, and it's a very cultural religion, and it's very much, like, no one ever told us we were sinning, but, like, we had to always, like, hang out with the, you know, the Greek boys and girls, and, like, everything was a ritual. I mean, you enter the church, and you light a candle for the people that you've lost, and then you kiss the icons, and you like, you know, thank them kind of for protecting you, and then you walk into the church and there's this incredible smell of incense and like deep red colors and wood, and these icons that before they were saints, they were definitely gods and goddesses, and it's very meditative. I'm not religious, I don't go to church, but anytime I walk into a Greek church, I get kind of spooked by other churches. But when I walk into a Greek church, you know, I'm like, this is like going to a meditation retreat. Like, it's the same stuff that they do in a yoga studio where you go to do meditation. It's dark and it smells a certain way, and there's certain colors around you, and it's quiet and it's sacred. And, you know, I think that's definitely like informed some of the work I do, but also like every holiday has like every Greek holiday, and again with Mexican culture too, there's like a series of things that you have to do. Like before you invite people over, you have to like burn these olive leaves to bless the house, and like then like, I don't know, I mean,
yeah, totally. These like cultural, like for me, I grew up around the corner from my grandmother's house, and my grandmother had 10 kids and raised who knows how many other ones, and like a good portion of them lived in that tiny house that she was in. So it was like we were kind of always together and doing things together. You know, I would just go there as like a default, and my uncles would be there, and my cousins would be there, and people would be talking and fighting and playing music and making food. And for me, a lot of that, like getting together with people and creating these rituals or these ceremonies comes from a lot of those gatherings, you know, and I get a lot of inspiration still from the way that my family gets together and celebrates these things. And they kind of still do it, which is really funny to me. My mom and her siblings, well, before COVID, would still get together like once a week. And I'm like, you guys are so attached to each other. I love that. Yeah. Like, and it's like a big cultural thing for us too in Cyprus, you know, on Sundays, they do the souvla and everyone gets together.
Every Sunday in Cyprus, it's like, I'll just like mosey on up to the village at my own pace, and they're like, oh, Ellpetha, you missed the souvla. And I'm like, what's the occasion? And they're like, Sunday. And I'm like, okay, so like next Sunday, do you want to tell me like the time? Because I like come for dinner at like 4, and they're like, we did it at 2. And I'm like, you made this massive meal at 2? And they're kind of like, now my uncle knows I'm like always late, so he'll call me at like 6 a.m. and be like, we're doing it at 11, so that I get there at like 3. And then, you know, it's like so funny. But yeah, also both of our families, it's all about food. Yeah. My mom is like a huge cook, and amazing, we actually joked with the Dia de los Muertos thing, like every holiday, my mom's like, we're doing something small. And then like I get home and there are 40 people there, and she's made 15 desserts. Like there's a dessert buffet, and like she makes every single thing, everything. Like she doesn't make you know, the pudding that's in this pudding dessert. She made the pudding from scratch, like to put in this like 10-layer thing. And I'm like, I thought we were, and then all night she's like, I get no help. I get no help. And I'm like, Mom, you invited 45 people over. I'm like, there's like a duck in the oven and a lamb outside and goat in the brick oven outside. And then you cooked a turkey, you know, and it's like,
a lot of food.
A lot of food.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And those things, and this was a big thing with Quince too, is like a lot of people when they get to America, they don't fit in to their cultures where they came from. And so they abandon them because the option is either like, for example, being queer, right? You're queer and you're Mexican or you're Greek or whatever it is, and you get to America and your Greek family doesn't support you being gay. So what do? You go, I can't be around them. I'm not Greek anymore. And you know what? It's not worth losing your whole culture. But we have to make spaces where these things, which I mean, being gay should not even be like a thing that we have to make space for. It's totally normal and wonderful and very much around. But, you know, it's a shame to lose touch with your culture over these things, whatever it might be, dating someone outside of your culture or just like not speaking the language well. And so I think that we have to embrace those things and make spaces for people to be able to, you know, modernize, which is what happened, and update. When you come to America, you have so many things available to you that you don't. At least in Cyprus, I can say in Mexico, some places, and then other places it's wildly developed there too. And so it's like with Quince, it's like, I don't know, that girl could have said like, you know, this sucks and ran away from home, the main character. But we didn't want to write that story because like we want her to, if she wants to be Catholic and have a quinceañera and be gay, then like, what are we just going to get rid of 90% of like her identity because she's gay? She shouldn't have to. And I think that's a big task given to first generation American or immigrant artists is how do we create those spaces where it's like, how can my work be so influenced by Greek Orthodoxy and my culture, but I'm not religious, you know? It's like, and I see sometimes my American friends will be a little confused. Like I'll talk about a saint and why the saint story is really cool. And they'll be like, ew, you like saints? And I'm like, and you know, it's like Camilo's got like a Virgin Marys all over the house. Like, you know, they're beautiful though. You're like, how can you look at that and not think it's like a beautiful, like, I feel like we have them all over. There's one right here.
Yeah, it's a nativity scene.
Like, I mean, it's like, how can you look at something like this and, I think we lost it. Hold on.
We're coming back.
Here, how can you look at camera 2, something like this and be like, that stinks. It's like, what? This is so beautiful. It's a nativity scene, like hand painted. I don't have to necessarily care that much about Jesus to appreciate this. And
yeah, it's like a lot of taking what serves you from your culture and being willing to update it, and it, you know, in a way that also pays tribute to the previous generation or to people who might not have the opportunity or just like the freedom to update their traditions. You know, we're not trying to like look at the previous generation and be like, you're wrong for believing these things. It's like, how can I show you my way of doing this in a way that's open to how you want to do it, like, with the goal of like bringing you a little bit closer to me and having you kind of understand where I'm coming from.
I mean, when ironically putting arugula with your lentils like triggers people, so you can imagine like how vast these worlds, and I'm not joking, like no one will eat my faki, which is this like traditional Cypriot thing, because I put it over arugula. What? Well, they don't, you know, it's delicious, but you know, it's like, so they're big things that we have to deal with, and I don't want to perpetuate the idea that we have to abandon where we came from in order to be who we are and embrace the things that are available to us in the United States, which I think that we both very, we both love where we're from, but I'll say I'm lucky to have been born here. because I would not be an artist and I would not have gotten the education that I got. And I would definitely have a lot of good traits still, but like, you know, I got a lot from being born in the United States, and I have a duality that is very, very interesting because of it. And it's not always easy. It sucks having your family on the other side of the world. Like, especially right now, I miss them so much. And it's hard to get to them, but I still, you know, I still have a lot of privileges having been born here, and having been able to, my father even being able to leave Cyprus, escape war, and come to the U.S. is like a big deal.
Thank you so much. You know, I like to think of culture as each of us like contributing like this like elaborate patch to the quilt, and I'm very grateful for the quilt that you are building by bringing your two cultures together, because like you sure gave a lot of people warmth during this like really strange, you know, winter that we've been in all year long. So thank you both so much for sharing, and I want to have that recipe for the
faki.
Yeah, is it complicated? It's like
there's like 4 things.
It's literally it's just rice, lentils, carrots, and onions. That's it. But when you live in America and you have like Brussels sprouts and butternut squash and like funky mushrooms, and you know, you can add all those things in, but just don't ever share it with someone from Cyprus, because they won't eat it unless you only make it with those 4 things.
They'll tell you made it wrong.
They will. They'll be like, they'll get mad. But anyway, put some arugula under that, and also we mailed you a mask. The mask from Dia de los Muertos. You should be getting it soon. Who knows?
Thank you so much. And also I want to say before we go that my new life goal is to be invited to the Tsivicos Christmas dinner.
Easter, and you know what's able to happen. It's you know, let's see what's going on in April with COVID, but it's always outdoors, and there's always a lamb, and sometimes a pig, and then we have goat in the brick oven in the backyard, and then like my mom's indoor insanity, which is like the dessert buffet, and then like she makes like the pigs in a blanket from scratch. She goes wild, but
yeah.
So hopefully
that's incredible.
You can come this year. You are invited.
Thank you so much. Eric, what was that?
You eat meat?
All the meat.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just like thinking that whenever I talk to you too, I always end up like so hungry. So thank you for that. And thank you everyone for joining us. You know, follow Camilo and Ellpetha, like they're really great. And I cannot wait to see where you go next. Like ready, take me. Ready to go.
We will.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Really,
thank you. Bye.
I'm gonna something. Do you mind staying for a little bit after everyone goes?